Ron, thank you so much for making time with me, especially because we're going to have a lot of time soon. Because as we speak, a few days before what's going to be happening is you and I are going to be part. Well, I will be hosting a panel that you're going to be part of, and we're going to be talking about black music, our experiences, just basically the way to celebrate Black History Month as we're slowly winding down this month. I have to ask you right off the top before I get to know you a little bit more and knowing your career and the things you've done and being part of all this. How have you been holding up, man, for the last year in dealing with not just COVID-19 pandemic and the shutdowns that have been happening all over the world, but also seeing the things that we've been seeing on social media and the news, too, and out our windows when it comes to Black Lives Matter, racism being spoken about in such a different manner than ever. The terms Karen and Kevin's are now something that people know about. The things, again, that we're seeing on social media, and also people talking about, I don't know if I'm going to get vaccinated. I don't want to wear a mask. I mean, so many things have been happening. And then just to add in there, the election in the U.S. that was explosive. How have you hold it up throughout seeing and experiencing all of this?
Yeah, thank you for those, pertinent questions. At this time, as a student of history, I pretty much expect things to be chaotic on planet Earth. You know what I mean? As far as back as we can read, we haven't been able to solve a lot of these same basic problems in different forms, different times, different epochs. So, again, because of my love for history, I understand that this is just another part of our human plight that we, I guess, essentially are meant to experience in some kind of ironic way. So philosophically, that's kind of the way I look at it. Now, on the ground, my lifestyle didn't change much in last March because as an artist, I was already kind of living what some of my friends might consider a reclusive type lifestyle, even though I can be the big socialite at times as well. So just this whole Gemini thing. But so really I was already shopping every 2 weeks, not going out to the grocery store, but every 2 weeks. I'm not the club type and this type thing. So I was in the shed anyway. And so to me, it was like, welcome to my world. Everybody having to stay home and deal with themselves and get to know themselves. So I've been doing that for a while as an artist, as you might understand, you know what I mean? And then the Black Lives Matter, again, I mean, I'm one of these public television geeks, so I'm up at late 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm watching civil rights footage as far as the eye can see in the past, and it's the same. We're holding up the same signs from 50 years ago. I am a man. I am real. You know what I mean? And so, again, it's been such a consistent problem with these issues that it is indeed my umwelt, as they say in science. This is the environment that I understand. In terms of the vaccination, overall, I think that people who traditionally were apt to get the flu shot in general will be the same demographic that will be apt to be on the front line of the vaccination, and then down from there, we will have some sway in terms of people changing their, minds in terms of whether they are quote unquote flu shot type people, And then as we hit the minorities, there's still a lot of distrust of science in the minority communities, and I could put that in many colloquial phrases in terms of I ain't taking the ... and all this. So, and then politically, that was an anomaly. I mean, I think we all know that, we allowed this guy's number 45, this kind of WWE wrestling mentality. It's just the same way you say, how can people watch that stuff? But you know what? It works. And so somehow, him coming from that world, he was able to use that same brainwashing mentality that we see on this kind of WWE. And hey, I came up with Ric Flair and the best of them, but it's just amazing how he was able to actually brainwash us based on that same type of herd mentality, and or the fact that people could suspend their reality like they do with WWE. So, I've got all these metaphors, and I've thought about this stuff. So I think I answered all your questions there.
I think you did, but I'm going to throw in one more before we start talking about your career. Your thoughts on how the authorities handled the Black Lives Matters movement and marches compared to the authorities handling the takeover of the Capitol in the U.S.
Oh, my Lord. The question is the answer, Rudy. Everybody knew as they were watching it. It didn't take but a few milliseconds for even our white brothers and sisters to start saying this would never have happened like this if this were black people. So everybody kind of immediately realized it, and I think that realization actually has to do with the progress that we're making since George Floyd. I think when even our white brothers and sisters realized this black people would never have been treated with this type of dignity, and I think when that swept through by way of that circus on January 6th, that had to do with us resuscitating the fervor that we needed, that, as we know, always dies in between George Floyd and the next big movement.
I have to, you know what? I know we're supposed to talk about the music stuff and everything, but there's one more I have to ask you about, and that is the story that came out about the several L.A. police who, on Valentine's Day, were giving out these disgusting cards on Floyd about what was it? I can't breathe, or it was something ridiculous like that, and they made it into a Valentine's Day card. Did you hear about this?
I have not heard about that. I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised. This is the type of mimicry and mockery that has existed not only in our hemisphere, but, again, the way we treat each other as humans. You can go into, we can get into other cultures and just the plights, much less what we deal with the racism and supremacy and lack of empathy and just meanness that we deal with. But, we can find this. We can find this everywhere. This is how humans have evolved to rationalize our existence with one another. But back to the matter at hand, which is what we go through in this Western Hemisphere. It's
sometimes I just have to turn it all off every once in a while. But the thing that I would not turn off is this panel that we're all part of. And congratulations, I'm so glad that you're part of this. Why was it important for you to be part of this?
Well, I have lived it, obviously, coming up, trying to experience upward mobility as an African-American man. And that's not playing the race card, that's like real, and so that experience, of course, has it puts me right on the ground with those issues, and so I'm talking about my own experience, and I'm interested in those things that I can share and learn on a panel like that about an experience such as ours, meaning minority, meaning African, and meaning the disenfranchised.
One of the things that you mentioned in the beginning of this conversation was the fact that you are a historian, you love history, but also you're a musician, you love music. How did those two entities form for yourself? And also, where did you grow up for these two to come together?
Sure, thank you. Well, I'm fortunate. I'm blessed to be the son of educators on both sides of my family. So I came up in a very where education was the imperative, reading, writing, and I was no whiz kid, but I was surrounded, by this tradition of, success and even excellence as it relates to academics. My mother was a retired school teacher, and by the time she passed, and this type of thing. So, I could easily just get into if it wasn't for my mom's speech, essentially, to answer that whole question. You know what I mean? Show me that. of history, and she had me dabbling with Socrates and Plato and stuff, even when I was in high school, just to kind of get my mind broaden my. Not that the English teachers themselves weren't, but I mean, my mother was reinforcing these type of things because she was an educator. So, and I woke up around my sophomore year in college. I started understanding what it meant to be an intellect or strive for intellectual, goals, and that was kind of folding in with me being in the shed, learning how to play my instrument, and so it all started working together in terms of the humility required to learn how to play the instrument, the understanding of the jazz history in particular. Because you have to understand jazz history to even learn how to play, to even get on the road with learning how to play. You've got to read this history. So that's some of the first history I started taking seriously, beyond whatever the English teacher was saying. You had to read in terms of my own incentive, reading jazz history because I wanted to learn how to play. And then I opened the book, and it's like Coleman Hawkins and then Lester Young and Bird, and you just I want to be like these guys. So that was probably the first history that I started really taking seriously. Then in college, I'm probably in the more romantic type when I was young, at least. So I started reading Yeats and Keats and trying to get this type of, and off of that, big interest in science and paleontology, and so I became kind of bookish, as you should, when I hit during my undergraduate phase, I just became very interested in knowledge, man, and I've been on the knowledge quest ever since.
Correct me if I'm wrong, your instrument is a trombone, correct?
Yes, my instrument is a trombone. It is, but I don't like to see. If you view the trombone as the Negro in America, as I often like to say, I don't like to be marginalized, but
okay.
Yes, I am the world's greatest trombonist. Yes.
Okay, the reason why is because you and I have spoken before, and I told you I played the trombone for about 10 years myself, and I love the trombone. I think it's probably one of the greatest instruments, but also one of the underrated instruments, because I don't even think people realize in some songs where they're hearing a sexy sound, they're thinking it's the trumpet or another horn, and they don't realize it's the trombone that's doing it. So I will ask you, what was the attraction for you with the trombone? And I know how difficult it is to play that instrument, too.
Yes, my friend, and trombone brother, you are correct. And conversely, people a lot of times do know that it's trombone. You got a lot of people that really love our instrument. You know what I mean? As well as people, like you say, they can't recognize the trombone from a harmonica.
Yes.
But I have this analogy that I'm sharing this for the first time publicly, which is this kind of metaphor of the trombone is like the Negro in America. It's kind of like you got to have them. You can't do without them. You know what I mean? You got to have them whether you want it or not. You got to respect what it does and you know what I mean? It's like I look at our instrument kind of in that way sometimes. And
I agree.
And we're always there, and we make the difference. You dig?
Absolutely. When did you start writing music yourself? And what were the themes that you were attracted to in writing music?
I started writing music at home, before I even got to the manuscript paper. I was already saying, hey, Mom, come check out this tune I wrote on, just using my ears in the early days of getting familiar with the piano and this type of thing. So I was already, because I got this legacy coming from my granddad that I didn't even realize that I was inside of until I was older, of course. And so my granddad, Joe Westray, is a pretty well-known composer as well. And so I always had that spark to create something, a representation in sound of what I perceived as my experiences. So but then from there, the Black Marching Band is where my foundation really starts to kick in with composition and the trombone specifically. So what I was just describing is kind of me and my piano experience, which piano is my first instrument, but trombone is the instrument that I mastered. So that focus came within the Black Marching Band, the show band, the bands that flip in the air and play at the same time. I came up in that environment. And so you have to technically not master, but you have to really technically have a lot of technical control of your instrument, and you have to have rhythm, and you have to have an ear for music. And so I'm one of those guys that would have been the section leader of the trombone section in the Black Marching Band. That's blowing your mind because you can't believe that they move like this and playing at the same time.
Okay, I got to jump in because I got to jump in because I want to make sure we understand this. You're playing in the U.S., correct?
Grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. Yeah, this is down south where I grew up in my hometown, Columbia, South Carolina. And just like this is the Bible Belt, it's also the marching band belt down this way.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking that is because we have seen what we've seen up here in Canada, in Toronto. We've seen movies, we've seen, specials and things like that. What is the experience actually like, and what is the training like to be part of something like this? Because I don't think there's anything out there that is so precise than this type of marching band. You do not see an error anywhere, and you do not hear an error. I could not imagine the concentration and the training that has to go with this. I'm surprised this ain't an Olympic sport.
Thank you so much for saying that. And so with what you already understand the context, so all I have to do is plug in the answer, which is yes. It entails, and that is my foundation. So the best example would be the movie Drumline. I mean, that movie was 2 thumbs up in terms of its accuracy of that culture. And so I experienced that culture at the high school level as a microcosm of what the movie was about, which was the university level, which I was a master and president of the South Carolina State Marching Band and president of the fraternity in the band, which is like equivalent to the Q Dogs in the band world. So I'm that guy, I'm the king of the Black Marching Band. And all my friends and family know that was the crown that I wore when I left the South.
That's an amazing experience. When you finally got out there yourself, what was it like for you to travel? What was it like for you to perform with other artists? And who are some of the other artists that you performed with? And starting to put out your own music, what was that experience like?
So, if you can imagine me being Mr. Neophyte this in college at South Carolina State in Orangeburg, that's where the Orangeburg Massacre was, getting back to our panel topics and things like that. The Orangeburg Massacre occurred where I went to my undergrad at South Carolina State University. Used to be college, but and so if you can imagine me being this guy that's like he's a freshman, but he's the section leader. He's a neophyte, but he's the president of the frat. He's the president of the frat, and he's the president of the band at the same. And then imagine this guy meeting Wynton Marsalis and deciding that because it was looking like I'm paraphrasing, but because it was looking like I had the chance to make the draft, what I call the jazz draft, similar to the NBA draft. So it's like when I met Wynton, I knew that I could make the jazz draft. So I had to give up marching band literally because of the potential for injury, something that I would not have thought about until I knew that the opportunity that I was looking for was at hand, which was entering the jazz world. And so I met Wynton. Wynton called me up on stage in my hometown. I'm paraphrasing this whole story, but he came to my hometown, played a concert. I drove down. I'm the big shot, right? This is, oh, man, Ron, you got to meet Ron Westray. Come on up here and play with us. So I played with Wynton when he came to town, hung out with him all night. And hit campus the next day. Everybody's like, yeah, Ron was on stage with Wynton. Boy, did you hear Ron? And that was the beginning of my jazz career.
Amazing. Where are some of the festivals and places that you perform that are you consider jewels in your career? And who are some of the other great jazz performers or just artists in general that you shared the stage with or a recording studio?
So, just to reiterate this so you understand the path, having met Wynton pulled me out there, and I started out with Marcus Roberts, even though I met Wynton first. Started out in Marcus Roberts' band. It's all the same family because Marcus had just left Wynton Septet, so Marcus was forming the band. So I started out, and then I got assigned to George Weins' Festival Productions roster. This was all happening. I had not even completed undergrad yet, and I was, yeah.
Wow.
I'm already on George Weins' roster. I'm about to do my first European tour with a group called the Jazz Futures with Nicholas Payton, Brian Blade on drums, Peter Martin on piano, Chris Thomas on bass, and that was my first tour with guys like that. When you talk, and Christian McBride and all the guys that I came out with, with the Young Lions, Roy Hargrove. This is like my brother. We all came out at the same time. And I'm talking about the young cats, not much less all of the giants that I was able to learn from, like Jimmy Heath and Hank Jones and Elvin Jones. And I've had sake at Elvin's house with Elvin and her name eludes me, which shouldn't, but I'm saying, and his partner, which you just found out of my mind, but I'm saying, so I've had, so many experiences once I entered the jazz world, and I was in that mode for 12 years of touring in that mode and becoming a jazz musician essentially, and which was just like a big brotherhood, and then the older guys, it was just like father figures. When you saw them, it was just a fatherly vibe. The guys that you came out with, those were like your brothers. Sometimes you tussled with them and got mad at them or whatever, and we all developed together. And that would be guys like Nicholas Payton and Christian McBride and Antonio Roney and just so many guys. Something Roy Hargrove was not here, Dwayne Burno, just so many. We came up together as the Young Lions, and those are the guys who came out in the early '90s, the Young Lions. After Wynton had come out in the '80s.
Now, as part of the legends, the true lions, the ones who do get up early in that morning and roar in the jungle, what do you think about the young lions that are coming in today, and how do you view jazz music today from when you were coming through?
Yeah. People think that, jazz is dying or dead or will be, but you always see this influx of young guys is constantly coming into the tradition. Man, have you heard so and so? No, when did he get to New York? Oh, he just got to New York about 3 years ago. 3 years ago. And so there's always this influx. So it just lets you know that this thing is going to keep going. My question becomes, I'm always amazed at the fact that these guys still have any incentive to join the tradition, because there's really no payout in jazz. You know what I mean? You don't get a lot of returns.
But there's a massive creativity to that.
Right.
And that's where, to me, that's where I think sometimes, let's put it this way, and I'm sorry, and I apologize if I interrupted you, but it's just something that sticks with me.
Not at all.
When it comes to people like yourself, or I even throw myself into it, when it comes to being creative, sometimes it's not about the price, it's about the heart. And I think that's where it comes from.
Precisely. Well, I think about myself as a young musician, but see, because you're looking at things through, and I'm sure as a writer, the journalist world, things, it's the same reality, which you come into the field looking at things through rose-colored glasses based on how the tradition treated other people that were, let's say, trying to do what you're trying.
Very true.
So when I entered the jazz world, and when I'm working on my composing chops, I'm in the same mindset as like Gershwin and Ellington. Even in the 90s when I hit the scene, I'm thinking that there's going to be a symbiosis with culture that is going to reward my efforts for writing in this style. Now that got shattered along the way, and then 20 years later, you're like you say, now you're one of the living legends, and it's like I see how young I was to think that I would be rewarded the same way Ellington and Gershwin were rewarded for their compositional efforts, when in fact the context that they were writing in made their music actually more popular music, whereas the context that I'm writing in was a historical context. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking that I would be rewarded on the same values as, say, those guys for my efforts. And so then you look up and you're like, that was silly to think that, because this is the popular music now. And so so back to the question, the young guys, I'm sure they have a lot of misconceptions too. When they come in, they think, oh, I'm going to do this or do that, or I'll be rewarded. And then that's when you ultimately make that decision that it's not about that and it's about your passion. Because so that's how it went down with me. It was like, okay, these values are no longer symbiotic with cultural interests that you have mastered. You see, but you see, I'm getting into some stuff now. You see.
I agree. Absolutely agree with you. What is the best advice that you've ever gotten to being part of this jazz world, and what advice would you pass along to the future jazz artists?
Man, I wish I could think of one guy that told me one thing. I honestly can't think of one guy. I've had nuances of influence from guys that whose opinions meant a lot to me, and just I could say something that my mom quoted to me when my light came on about going forward, which was a quote that she was always using: "Stay started, stay started." And so that's when I think about one quote like that, that's the quote that I still carry around with me. Stay started, and so, and that's what I do,
We are talking about music. You're still recording music. We were just talking beforehand that you've actually recently released an album. Talk a little bit about that, please, and the theme behind it.
If I can work backwards, I'm going to work backwards to the albums that I announced at the beginning of the interview. Those records were Magisteria and Jimmy Jazz, which are on the label that I'm on, which is called Blue Canoe Records. BlueCanoeRecords.com. Go check us out. And so when I think about records that promoters want to know about, meaning that's got all the ISBN and stuff connected to it, those are those type records. But I've been doing a lot of independent records that have more relevance to where I am right now, that I could also talk about. But those would be the commercial records, and that would have been like back in 14 and 15. And those records have gained popularity along the way because they're good, durable jazz records. And Magisteria, which is a scientific term that means this kind of equality between science and religion. And so Magisteria is the median between science and religion, or your belief in either or. And so like jazz and hip-hop is the metaphor, the kind of medium and meeting of jazz and hip-hop. And so that record is called Magisteria. And before that, I did a tribute to Jimi Hendrix, a guy that I really connect with from a kind of psychological standpoint. Like many people, I'm sure, I connect with Jimmy and his spirit. And so I finally was able to record that record, Jimmy Jazz, where I did all of the big ones, Purple Haze and Hey Joe. And those records are doing well. It's been about 5 or 6 years, though. But I've done a lot of independent stuff, man, since then, like just at my website, or it's actually just the Bandcamp website, TreyDeuce1 at bandcamp.com. Trey with an A, DEUCE, TreyDeuce1 at bandcamp.com. And that's where all my independent projects, including my alter ego as a rapper, which was something I had to let out along the way. And So I've been into a lot of interesting projects that are not the ones that the promoters are looking for the press kit on, but that are really more relevant to kind of where I've been trying to point my interest. And that might be another conversation.
And that's where the creativity that I was just talking about, that's what I mean. When we have it, we got to release it. You are going to be part of this amazing panel. What do you hope people who are going to be tuning into this, what do you hope that they will get from this?
I want to just update some of these, just kind of the general conclusions that we come to about these topics that have been talked about just for many decades. And I just want to refresh, just like you would refresh the screen on your computer, or the way that these conclusions, and try to look at things through a modern lens, a progressive lens, a current lens, and come up with new ways of resolving some of these topics, other than in the same way that they are generally resolved. So, for instance, the idea of other cultures taking music from other cultures, instead of just it being a dead-end conversation of, oh, that's bad that they did that, let's try to look at it as being a necessary part of the evolution of all of those cultures, and kind of just broaden, take another step beyond the kind of typical conclusions that we've drawn on some of these issues, whereas some of the other panelists might want to point at more activism-based issues. But that's kind of where I'm coming from. Let's take a new step with an old issue.
There we go. Social media is the place to go to follow you. Where do we go to get you?
Thanks, man. I'm Ron Westray on Instagram. I'm also Ron Westray at Twitter. I'm also Ron Westray on LinkedIn, and I'm also Ron Westray on, I think I named them all, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Ron Westray.
I think we got it all. Ron, thank you so much for making time to speak with me. I'll be speaking to you again, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts when we get into this panel as we celebrate Black History Month through music.
Likewise, Rudy. Look forward to you mediating that panel, and it's coming up fast, and hope to see everybody there, and I'll be talking to you there, if not before.